This is 9 News with Sophie Walsh.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news. The federal court has just ruled Senator Pauline Hansen breached the Racial Discrimination Act over a tweet the judge slammed as profoundly insulting. Annalise Bolt is following the story for us. Annalise, talk us through the ruling.
Sophie, this all centres on a tweet made by Senator Hansen back in September 2022, where she told fellow Senator Marine Faruqi to, quote, piss off back to Pakistan. A federal court judge has just ruled that that tweet was deeply offensive and insulting and that it was not done reasonably, even remarking that Senator Hansen has a tendency to say things which are racist and Islamophobic. Here is some of that judgment.
Her tweet was an angry personal attack on Senator Faruqi. With no discernible content or comment, the court has found that Senator Hansen's tweet was not reasonable or in good faith or a fair comment.
Senator Faruqi has just celebrated on the steps of court. She hugged her legal team and punched the air, describing this as a landmark ruling that sets a precedent for how racism is viewed in Australia.
This ruling draws a line that hate speech is not free speech. And those who subject people to racial abuse will not get away scot-free.
As for Senator Hansen, she was not present in court. She's been ordered to pay Senator Faruqi's costs, which are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's also been told to delete that tweet in question. She has just responded on Twitter. She says she's deeply disappointed by the ruling and she's now speaking to her legal team, considering whether to appeal. Sophie?
Annalise Bolt with that breaking news from the federal court. Thank you. To more breaking news now, and the boyfriend of a Melbourne mum found with horrific fatal stab wounds has just been sentenced to a maximum 28 years jail over her murder. Police discovered Ellie Price's body in the bedroom of her South Melbourne home in May 2020 while performing a welfare check. It took jurors just over a day to return a guilty verdict against Ricardo Barbaro in September. Less than a week out from an election with worldwide repercussions, the US presidential nominees are honing in on the local issues that could decide the outcome. Today, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are both rallying in the West, outlining their stances on women's rights and courting the Latino vote. US correspondent Lauren Tomasi is in Phoenix, Arizona for us. Lauren, good morning. Another divisive day on the campaign trail.
It certainly has been, Soph. Good morning to you. And really divisive when it comes to those key demographics, which is what both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are targeting once again today. They've travelled here to the west side of America, to the Sun Belt, to Nevada and Arizona, which are both key battleground states in this election. And they are looking at courting those Latino voters. Here in Phoenix, around 1 in 4 voters are Latino. They are a key path when it comes to getting back into the White House. And so both of these sides are really trying to hone in on getting those last-minute undecided voters. For Kamala Harris, she has been here in Phoenix and has just jetted off to Nevada, and she's using that superstar power once again, leaning into Latino superstar power this time. She'll be joined by Jennifer Lopez in the next couple of hours on stage. J-Lo, of course, born with Puerto Rican parents. She's very proud of her heritage and came out in the last couple of days after those remarks at Donald Trump's rally, which referred to Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. But look, for Donald Trump, he's facing backlash from a different demographic, women. He made these comments about women at a rally last night, despite the former president saying publicly that his advisors had warned him against it and that it was inappropriate.
I want to protect the women of our country. Well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government shouldn't be telling her what to do. Not the government.
Look, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, was really quick to seize on those comments and to condemn them. Kamala Harris, of course, a cornerstone of her campaign is women's rights. Kamala Harris says this is another reveal of Donald Trump's views on women. As we go to air right now, Soph, more than 60 million Americans have already gone to the polls. It is 5 days to go until Election Day, and then America decides.
We wait with bated breath. Lauren Tomasi, thank you. Well, 3 men from Western Sydney are this morning behind bars, sentenced for their roles in a multi-million-dollar fraud against the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Live now to federal politics reporter Claudia Vradoljak. Claudia, the government has been trying to clean up this scheme.
Yeah, and this is a big development, Sophie. It's the result of a 4-year investigation between the Australian Federal Police and the NDIS. The trio were involved in a Western Sydney syndicate defrauding the NDIS of millions of dollars in false claims, some for people found not to have a disability. The 2 men and 1 woman were arrested back in 2021 after officers seized hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, gold, luxury cars and jewellery. Now they've been sentenced for their roles, combined facing more than 12 years in prison and ordered to repay more than $575,000. Authorities are warning this is just the beginning as the government cracks down on shonky providers, introducing changes in an attempt to clean up the scheme, which, Sophie, just continues to grow.
And Claudia, how much are these reforms set to save?
Well, Sophie, new data has been released today by the federal government. It reveals the reforms they've already made will save the budget $1 billion this financial year. The scheme costing $210 billion over the next 4 years. That's more than $2 billion lower than previous projections. Now, a recent crackdown that kicked in at the start of October is contributing to those numbers. Those changes include cuts to some services like childcare fees, some therapies, rent and other bills that people have been claiming. And there is more to come. Just on Monday, NDIS Minister Bill Shorten proposed new laws threatening massive fines for people and businesses who abuse or exploit Australians living with a disability. Under the plan, lifetime bans would extend from operators to individual workers and give the NDIS Commissioner new powers. That legislation is expected to be introduced by the end of the year, but clearly changes are already making a significant contribution to bring down what is one of the biggest costs for government. Sophie, we will hear from Minister Shorten later this afternoon.
OK, Claudia, thank you. Newly elected Queensland Premier David Crisafulli is about to announce his cabinet. Live to Josh Bavis in the Brisbane newsroom. Josh, what can we expect?
Well, Sophie, we'll likely see little changes when it comes to the shadow ministry taking up their new positions as ministers. It's less than a week since Labor's defeat at the state election. The LNP is set to secure at least 53 seats in the 93-seat parliament. New Premier David Crisafulli hasn't revealed exactly who will be his new ministers, but has said there will likely be little change to the shadow cabinet when they get elevated to their new positions. A handful of the MPs who will be elevated to ministers today at the Government House this afternoon do have experience in ministry going back about 10 years when the LNP was last in power. Sophie?
Josh, thank you. An under-pressure Prime Minister has reportedly claimed he is the victim of an unfair media campaign as the Qantas Perks controversy continues to grow. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has now been dragged into the saga after admitting his office requested a flight favour from mining magnate Gina Rinehart.
The Liberal Party has wasted a week of the nation's life, which we're not going to get back. All they've done is try and throw mud, and most of it's ended up on their own face.
I don't like to hold others to a standard I'm not prepared to subject to myself. I think that's really important, and I'll be obviously updating declarations. And MPs are doing that right now across the board on both sides.
Politicians on both sides claim all upgrades have been declared and are above board. A woman has been injured after flipping her car when she crashed into a traffic light in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Emergency crews were called to Edgecliff early this morning, finding the woman in her 40s trapped inside that vehicle. A rising death toll and a desperate search for those missing. Up next, the scale of the devastating floods in Spain that residents have likened to a tsunami. The latest on the war in the Middle East and the new threat of retaliation from Iran. And a police dog unit saddened by the deaths of 2 of its own. The investigation now underway. A cycle of retaliation is set to continue in the Middle East, with Iranian officials warning that it is planning to respond to Israel's recent attacks. Earlier, a barrage of rockets from Lebanon killed 7 people in Israel, the deadliest cross-border strikes in the country since the IDF invaded its northern neighbour. New pictures this morning of what North Korea's latest missile test. Leader Kim Jong-un, a keen observer. It is the first test firing of an intercontinental ballistic missile in almost a year and shows a potential advancement in the country's ability to launch long-range nuclear attacks at the US mainland. The death toll in Spain has surged past 150 as rescue crews enter areas previously inaccessible due to floodwaters. It is the worst storm to hit the country in decades, and residents are not yet out of the firing line.
The death toll from Spain's floods is rising and rising rapidly. Soldiers now called in to help with the cleanup and help reach areas that have previously been inaccessible to try and search for the dozens of people that are still missing. Officials on the ground warn that there are likely bodies inside the cars that have been tossed on top of one another, while people in the communities that bore the brunt of these floods describe it as like a tsunami-like wave that swept through their towns. They said narrow streets became like death traps. Everyone is being touched by this in some sort of way in the Valencia province. In one town alone, 40 people have lost their lives. And while the rain continues in some areas of Spain, in Valencia, the shift has now definitely turned to the painful cleanup.
We lost everything. This is something you see maybe in the movies, in the news, and you never expect this to happen to us. That's finally happened, and yeah, we have to find a new home now, and it's devastating. Yeah.
The images coming out of Spain are nothing short of horrific. Bridges have been washed away, so too roads. This is going to take Spain months, if not years, to recover from. And as hard as things are at the moment, can you believe looters are in action? 40 people have been arrested in the Valencia region. Spain's Prime Minister has toured Ground Zero. He is promising that any aid needed will be supplied, but he's also warning that this natural disaster is not over yet.
2 people have died in Taiwan as the island was battered by its biggest storm in decades, Typhoon Kongray. Its high winds damaged buildings, bringing down trees and cutting power lines. Those braving the wild weather were left worse for wear, with hundreds of injuries reported. Greece's anti-terrorist squad is investigating an explosion that blew apart an Athens apartment, killing a man and severely injuring a woman. Authorities are now examining the possibility the man was building a bomb and it accidentally detonated, blowing himself up. Burglaries, vandalism and downright chaos in downtown Los Angeles. This is the aftermath of the LA Dodgers World Series win over the New York Yankees. But these Dodgers fans took the celebrations way too far. A bus set alight, shops looted and fireworks set off in the direction of police. The streets took several hours to clear and a number of people were arrested. A Russian court has fined YouTube's parent company Google 2 decillion rubles for blocking Russian state media channels on its platform. The unfathomable penalty, dwarfing the world's estimated total GDP at $110 trillion, continues to grow in size. A Kremlin spokesperson said while the amount is full of symbolism, the US tech giant should reconsider tech restrictions in Russia. Well, if you're in Sydney, you could soon be paying a whole lot more for water, with a new proposal lodged with the regulator to increase rates by at least 50% over the next 5 years. Sydney Water has asked to put up rates by 18% in the next financial year, followed by yearly rises of 6.8% plus inflation.
We all know that Sydney is a growing city and we want to play our part. What we're going to do is actually set aside $1 billion worth of customer support programs to help our customers who need it the most.
Sydney Water says that while the city has some of the lowest water bills in the country, the increase is needed to fund vital projects and upgrade ageing infrastructure across the city. An investigation has been launched into the deaths of 2 police dogs in Sydney South. The canines, Extra and Soldier, were attending a development day at Lucas Heights yesterday when they were found unresponsive in the back of their vehicle by their handler. Police say the dogs were being kept in a purpose-built, air-conditioned pod. Property market cooled down. The capital city is where home values are slipping. The Melbourne Cup Carnival about to be off and racing. And in sport, hundreds of NRL players become free agents as the off-season signing frenzy begins. Property prices have continued to rise across the country for the 21st consecutive month. The report by CoreLogic shows the uptick is fueled by Perth and Adelaide, but other capital cities, including Sydney and Melbourne, have experienced declines. Sydney continues to be the priciest market, though, approaching a median house price of $1.5 million. Final preparations are almost complete for the start of the Melbourne Cup Carnival. The roses have been pruned, the champagne is on ice, and fans are ready to flock to Flemington, and tickets are becoming hot property.
We're on the cusp of a sellout for both Derby and Lexus Melbourne Cup Day. I don't want to go too early, but really positive. Overall, we're 10% up year on year.
It all starts with Derby Day tomorrow before the Cup on Tuesday, then Oaks Day and Stakes Day. Sports news now, and Josh Agar has addressed his messy exit from the Bulldogs after having his contract terminated by the board over a positive roadside drug test. In a statement, the winger said, "I came to the Bulldogs at their lowest point to make a change. I hope I did that for you all. Unfortunately, circumstances won't allow me to be at the Bulldogs any longer, and I wish the club and especially their fans nothing but success." Agar is now one of hundreds of players needing a new deal, with more than a third of the league becoming free agents today. The Samoan Test team won't be backing down when they take on England again this weekend, promising to get right in their rivals' faces again during the emotional Siva Tau.
I just think it's good for the game, and I don't really want to enter into what other people's opinions are. We think it's good for our team. We think it's good for the Test match series. So we'll jump out and do the same thing again this weekend.
Panthers premiership winger Isaac Tungo has been ruled out of that test with a minor injury. The career of Melbourne defender Joel Smith is over, with the AFL and Sports Integrity Australia hours away from announcing a 4-year ban for cocaine use and trafficking. The 28-year-old failed a drug test in August of last year, with subsequent investigations uncovering text messages from Smith to fellow Demons players offering them illicit drugs. Smith has provisionally suspended since February. 2 Australians have surged into the quarterfinals of the Paris Masters, Alex de Minaur and Jordan Thompson flying the Aussie flag. De Minaur's win over Jack Draper moves him one step closer to sealing the final place in the season-ending ATP Tour Finals. For Thompson, it is the first time he's reached the final 8 of a Masters 1000 event, defeating Adrian Manarino. A former Walt Disney World staffer is accused of hacking software and changing allergen information for theme park menus. It's alleged Michael Schuer, who was fired in June, used his personal computer to remove peanut allergy warnings. Authorities say no customers were harmed. Now, if you've ever wanted to feel like a secret agent, Rolls-Royce has a one-of-a-kind luxury car on offer for the 60th anniversary of the James Bond film Goldfinger. Fitted with multiple gleaming gadgets, the new Phantom Goldfinger includes a gold-plated golf club and a solid 18-carat bar in the centre console. Well, say cheese, a 63-year-old man has been arrested in the UK in connection with the theft of $500,000 worth of award-winning cheddars. 22 tonnes of the Dairy Delight, or 950 wheels, were delivered to an alleged fraudster who was posing as a wholesale distributor in France. Stay with us, your other details are next. Taking a look at the national weather forecast around the country today. Brisbane, you can expect a shower or two with the chance of a storm, 30 the top. A shower or two on the way for Sydney in 22. A bit of cloud about in Canberra, 23. Cloudy conditions over Melbourne, 17 degrees. A shower or two clearing for Hobart, 15. Clear skies over Adelaide, 24. Perth mostly sunny and 28. A shower or two on the way for Darwin and 32. Taking a look at tomorrow, the chance of a shower to start your weekend in Brisbane, 27 degrees. Cloudy for Sydney, 22. Few clouds about in the nation's capital as well, 25. Mostly sunny in Melbourne and 27. Hobart partly cloudy and 23. Fine conditions across Adelaide, a warm top of 35 degrees. Perth, a shower or two and 22. A possible shower or storm for Darwin and 33 degrees. And finally, taking a look at Sunday, Brisbane partly cloudy, 28 degrees. Sydney mostly sunny and 31. Becoming windy in Canberra, but mostly fine, 31. Melbourne, chance of a shower, 25. Hobart partly cloudy and 20. Similar conditions for Adelaide and Perth, 23. And the chance of a shower and 35 in Darwin, a warm one. And what better way to bring the spookiest day of the year than with a pumpkin feast? These very cute animals at Prague Zoo were treated rather than tricked this Halloween. The special surprise due to a surplus of pumpkins across the Czech Republic. And that is Nine's Morning News. We will be back at 4 p.m. with your afternoon news. I'm Sophie Walsh. Thank you for your company. See you again soon.